The morning sun rose over the red hills of Dakota Territory, spreading its golden warmth across miles of dry prairie and whispering grass. Out by the old railway station stood a single woman, her face pale from days of travel, her dress dusty from the long journey west. She held a worn suitcase in one hand and a letter in the other, the ink on its envelope already smudged by tears. Her name was Clara Bennett, a mail-order bride who had come all the way from Boston to marry a rancher named Samuel Dyer. But Samuel never showed up. Word spread quickly through the small town of Crows Bend that the man had ridden off days ago, leaving behind nothing but an unpaid mortgage and an empty cabin at the edge of his land. No one knew what to do with her, a stranger with nowhere to go. Most folks turned their eyes away, muttering something about bad luck and city women, but one man stayed watching. His name was Luke Carson, and a quiet, broad-shouldered cowboy who lived on the next ranch over from Dyer's place. He wasn't one for talk or trouble, but something in that woman's trembling hands struck deep in him. Maybe it was the look of someone trying real hard not to break. Luke rode up, took off his hat, and said softly, "Ma'am, you can't stay out here all alone. Come on, I've got a warm fire and some stew up the road." Clara hesitated, fear flashing in her eyes. But as the cold prairie wind swept across the empty platform, she nodded. The two rode back through the sagebrush and across the creek until they reached Luke's cabin, a small, sturdy home built with his own hands, standing proud against the endless land. Inside, the smell of pine smoke and stew filled the air. For the first time in days, Clara sat down by a fire that felt safe. Luke didn't ask questions that night. He gave her space, a blanket, and quiet company, the kind that didn't demand words. In the days that followed, Clara helped around the cabin, cooking, washing, tending to Luke's injured mare. She was graceful, though sadness clung to her like a shadow. Luke kept busy fixing fences and hauling hay, but every so often, his eyes drifted toward the cabin window where she hummed softly, staring into the open fields. Slowly, without meaning to, he began to care. He saw how she prayed every morning, how she read that same smudged letter each night before folding it away like a broken dream. He didn't tell her he'd already ridden by Samuel's old place and found it stripped bare. No sign of the man anywhere. One evening, as thunder rolled across the horizon, Clara came to the porch, her voice barely a whisper. She told Luke everything, how Samuel had written her kind letters, promised her a life full of love and peace, and asked her to come west. But when she arrived, she learned he'd been running from debt. A drinking man who wanted a wife to help pay his way. He'd left before her train even reached the station. The shame was heavy in her words, and tears slipped down her cheeks. Luke didn't speak. He just took off his hat, knelt beside her and said, "You did nothing wrong, ma'am. Sometimes the good Lord closes one door so we can walk through another." That night the storm raged outside, lightning flashing through the window panes. Luke stayed by the fire, keeping watch while Clara slept. He realized then that he wanted to protect her, not because she needed saving, but because her quiet strength had filled a part of his life he didn't know was empty. The next morning, as the clouds broke and sunlight spilled across the valley, he made a choice. No matter what the town said, he'd give her a home, even if she never loved him back. But destiny had its own plans. Spring came early that year. The snow melted fast, leaving behind soft green hills and the scent of wildflowers in the wind. Luke and Clara had fallen into a peaceful rhythm. She tended the garden, and he worked the herd, both speaking less but understanding more. The pain in her eyes had faded into something gentler, something almost like hope. Still, she often stood at the ridge at sunset, looking east as if wondering what life might have been. Luke never asked. He just stood beside her quietly. Then one afternoon, trouble rode into the valley. A pair of rough men came down from the hills, and outlaws looking to collect on Samuel Dyer's old debts. They said the land still belonged to him. And since Clara had been meant to marry the man, they figured she might have something worth taking. Luke met them at the gate, his rifle resting on his shoulder, calm but ready. "Ain't nothing for you here," he said. The men laughed and said they'd come back by sundown. Clara's face went white, fear returning like an old ghost. Luke told her to stay inside, but she refused. Together they worked fast, locking the barn, drawing water, and preparing for whatever came next. As the sky turned orange, the riders returned. Gunfire split the evening air, echoing across the hills. Luke fought with the quiet fury of a man defending not just his home, but his heart. When one outlaw tried to set fire to the porch, Clara grabbed the old shotgun Luke kept by the hearth. Her hands shook, but her aim was true. The blast sent the men running, their horses kicking up dust into the fading light. When the silence finally settled, Luke turned to find Clara standing tall, the fire reflecting in her eyes. That night, as they sat by the hearth, Clara reached for his hand. "You saved me," she whispered. Luke smiled softly. "No," he said. "You saved yourself. I just stood beside you." Tears glimmered in her eyes, but this time, they were from something deeper, gratitude and love. Slowly, she leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. Outside, the night was calm again. Stars scattered across the sky like silver dust. In that small cabin, two broken hearts had found their peace. Months passed, and when the preacher came through town again, folks whispered when they saw Luke and Clara standing together at the church steps, but no one dared say a word. They knew what they'd been through, and even in a place as wild as the frontier, love had found its way. Clara's laughter filled the valley now, and Luke's cabin glowed every night with the warmth of something pure and new. In the end, Luke often thought back to that day at the station. A lonely woman, a letter, and a choice that changed everything. Life had a strange way of bringing two lost souls together just when they needed it most. And so, dear listener, if you believe love can rise from the ashes of heartbreak, if you believe kindness still lives in this world of storms and dust, then don't forget to subscribe for more heart-touching tales of hope, redemption, and love that stands the test of time. Because out here in the Wild West, every soul has a story, and the next one might just be yours.